guys, welcome into Falcons Today by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here, hoping everyone is having a good weekend. On today's show, I've got a 5-step plan for the Atlanta Falcons to have a perfect offseason now that they have hired Raheem Morris. So we're going to run through that 5-step plan, and I have some honorable mentions at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around. But step 1 of my 5-step plan for a perfect offseason is draft Jaden Daniels at pick number 8. If you have been watching our channel for quite some time, this might surprise you. You might have thought I would lead off with trade for Justin Fields. And believe me, I am a big Justin Fields believer. But if I'm Terry Fontenot, I think the absolute dream is Jaden Daniels at number 8. You don't have to give up any draft picks for Justin Fields in this situation. Plus, you get 4 up to 5 years of rookie control with Jaden Daniels compared to Fields, which is at max 2 right now. And listen, I'm not saying that to poo-poo on the idea of trading for Justin Fields, but even I, a big Justin Fields believer, can see Jaden Daniels at pick number 8, cheaper, longer, and no draft compensation going over to Chicago. That's really the ideal, perfect scenario. Now, how likely is it that Jaden Daniels is there at number 8? I mean, you can look at his stats and you can probably connect the dots yourself. The Heisman winner from last season may very well go in the top 3 this year. But this is my perfect scenario for the Atlanta Falcons. So if I have to stretch the lines a little bit, so be it. But Jaden Daniels, in my opinion, is going to make one hell of an NFL quarterback. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. I feel like there is just this overall thought that, oh, you're a rushing quarterback. That must mean you're like 5'11", and you can't see over the offensive line. Jaden Daniels is one of the most elusive rushers in college football last year, and he did it at 6'4". Now, he is a little bit of an older quarterback, which I know that turns some people off, but it doesn't really frighten me all that much. Yes, he turned 23 in December, so he'll turn 24 during his rookie season. But if you look around the NFL right now, some of the best quarterbacks are playing their best football as they get a little bit older. So I don't have much of a beef with Jaden Daniels coming into the league at 23 years old. Now, if Jaden Daniels does end up going in the top 3, plan B is trade for Justin Fields. However, it's a little bit complex because it's not like we'll see Justin Fields get traded during the NFL draft. I actually believe a Justin Fields trade could happen very shortly after the NFL Combine, which is at the end of this month in early March or runs up to the beginning of March. So I think that is where Justin Fields' trade value will be at its highest. Because if you think about it, if the Bears wait until mid to late March, well, Kirk Cousins will have re-signed then, and then Baker Mayfield will have re-signed then, and you're going to see the QB market start to dry up a little bit. Whereas if you trade him before all those signings happen, well, there's a whole bunch of open doors, and his value may be higher than later on. So let me know, if you were to pick a quarterback, which QB would you roll with? Jaden Daniels or Justin Fields? This is a very important question because at the end of the day, you don't pick a quarterback solely because one's got a cheaper contract for a little bit longer. You take the quarterback you believe can be the next franchise QB. And maybe I'm blinded, but I think both these quarterbacks can be very, very good in the NFL. And so because in my eyes, they come really close in terms of their evaluation, I will lean towards the one that gives you more rookie contract control and does not cost you any draft compensation to land. That's kind of the tiebreaker in my eyes. Moving on to part 2 of my perfect offseason plan for the Falcons, sign Tee Higgins. Get the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver down to Atlanta. Now, what would it cost you? That's step number 1. Spotrac comes out with contract projections for a lot of their marquee free agents, and this is what they projected for Tee Higgins. 4 years, $74 million. That's an average of $18.6 million a season, and that does not even have him finish top 10 for highest paid wide receivers, which definitely seems a little bit on the lower end. I mean, when you look at Tee Higgins through 4 seasons with the Bengals, he had 2 consecutive 1,000-yard years. The touchdowns really jump out to me as a number 2 guy. Plus, he's not some, slant boy or anything. He's a big play machine. He can make all the catches you need. He's great on the sideline. He's great over the middle of the field. He's great in the red zone. Tee Higgins is an extremely well-rounded wide receiver. But when you look at the last 2 years of NFL free agency, the highest paid guy was Christian Kirk at $72 million. Now, Tee Higgins is better than pretty much, at least for his age and where he's at in his career, all 8 of those wide receivers. But it does go to show that the wide receiver market, it's not advantageous to be a free agent wide receiver these days because there are so many great wide receivers coming into the draft every year. Why would a team sign a wide receiver to $75 million when they can just draft one in the first or second round that may not be as good as that $75 million free agent wideout, but it'll be a marginal difference in terms of talent, but a huge difference in terms of what you're paying them. So ultimately, Christian Kirk may be projected to get that much. I could see him making more, but I could also see the market going, bad news, T. No one's paying wide receivers anymore like they used to. So this is the best we can offer you. And that's kind of good news for GMs and fans that want their team to save as much money as possible because that's more money to spend elsewhere. But we can all agree, like, put the contract stuff aside for a moment. Let's just talk about Tee Higgins in Atlanta. If you had Jaden Daniels under center, Bijan behind him, Drake London to the left, Tee Higgins to the right, Kyle Pitts in the slot, there's no NFC South defense that is stopping that offense. Not one. Especially not 6 times a year. I can really get behind Tee Higgins coming down to the Falcons. They need to give Drake London a running mate. London is the only returning rostered wide receiver last season. Make a splash. Let's get Tee Higgins down to the Falcons. You brought Jesse Bates down from Cincinnati last year. Maybe Jesse Bates can pick up the phone, call his buddy T, and go, you know what? You're going to love it down here. Let's get you a nice big apartment in Buckhead, and let's roll. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's show, I do have to tell you all about our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. With the Super Bowl coming up this upcoming week, make sure you get started with Prize Picks today because you are going to want to make some dough while watching the big game. The way Prize Picks works is you pick 2 to 6 players. Now, the more players you select, the more potential winnings. And then you just choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, I'm playing it on a bit of the safer side. I'm going with 3 player selections. I'm going with the more on Patrick Mahomes, which they are doing a special right now at half a passing yard. That's correct. 0.5. We just need 1, okay? Then I like the more on Isaiah Pacheco at half a rushing or receiving touchdown. And finally, I like the more on Brock Purdy at 248.5 passing yards. So if you think I am on the money with these bad boys, feel free to ride with me. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I put that link, because I love you all so much, in the comments and description of today's video. Step 3 of a perfect offseason plan for the Falcons: sign defensive end Jonathan Greenard. We took care of the offense to begin, right? Drafting Jayden Daniels at number 8, going Tee Higgins in free agency. But the Falcons, they've got some money to spend, especially if they make a couple of very minor releases. They could free up to $20 million, and you could spend that $20 million on Jonathan Greenard, who had a breakout season for the Houston Texans this past year. Former third-round pick, 12.5 sacks in 2023, 15 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. He is due for a big payday, and I'm sure the Houston Texans would love to bring him back, but we know that this is a business, and money talks, and we might see Atlanta swoop in with a bigger offer. Now, Spotrac projects that Jonathan Greenard could earn a 4-year, $53 million contract, which comes out to an average of $13.4 million. Now, the Falcons right now have got about 25-ish million in cap space, but they could free up to an additional $20 million more. So they could have $45 million to spend for this offseason. That's 13 right there. What do we say Tee Higgins was at, like 17, 18? We've got plenty of money to spend on these players. Bring Jonathan Greenard down to Atlanta and put him in this Falcons outside linebacker rotation with Arnold Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter if he stays. But Bud Dupree was signed to a 1-year contract. He is likely gone in March, so you need to find a replacement for him, and that very well could be Mr. Greenard. Step 4, trade for Jonathan Allen. We doubled up on the offense. Let's double up on the defense here. And I am really doubling up on pass rushers. Jonathan Allen, the Washington Commanders defensive lineman, has been somewhat vocal the last 6-7 months about how frustrating it has been in Washington his entire NFL career, and all they've done is lose. Well, hopefully that can change down in Atlanta. Now, I also remember that the Falcons tried to trade for a different Washington defensive lineman, Montez Sweat. Ultimately, he went to the Bears. But what if they called about his old teammate, Jonathan Allen? This was the trade idea I came up with. Jonathan Allen and a day 3 draft pick going to the Falcons for a 3rd-round pick. Now, maybe that 3rd rounder is too light, but Jonathan Allen is a little bit older than Montez Sweat. He's also already signed his contract, so the Falcons would be taking on a big-ish contract. I think this is pretty fair. Maybe it costs a second, and if Calvin Ridley re-signs with the Jags, which we'll talk about later on, spoiler, the Falcons would have an extra second to spend, so they could swing it to get a Jonathan Allen trade done. But I think Jonathan Allen coming over to the Falcons would be a big get for this Atlanta defensive line. You look at what he's done the last 3 seasons. 5.5 sacks, 7.5 sacks, 9 sacks. And what stat do you guys think I like the most there? It's not even the sacks. It's actually nice. Tackles for loss are nice. How about the availability? There's nothing worse than when your team goes out and makes a big signing and then you never see that guy play. Jonathan Allen has been very consistent for the Washington Commanders. And he could step in and take Calais Campbell's role on the defensive line. You put Jonathan Allen, David Onyemata, and Grady Jarrett, when he's healthy, back together, no one's moving that line. That is the Berlin Wall of Atlanta. It ain't going anywhere. Not even Gorbachev could take that wall down. That would be one incredible defensive line. So circling back to that trade idea, I want to get your opinion on this. Do you guys think this is a good idea or not? Am I crazy? Or am I onto something here? I know we just, in this theoretical world, we just got the Falcons' Jonathan Greenard, but more is more. And the Falcons, they should not spare anything for trying to find a solution to their pass rushing woes for the last, kind of their entire franchise's history, if we're being brutally honest here. Now, step 5 of a perfect offseason plan, extend AJ Terrell. This one might not be a big, sexy, splashy move. It's not a draft pick. It's not a signing. It's not a trade. But I do think it's important for the Falcons to retain their proven commodities, their better players. And I think AJ Terrell is one of those better players. I tossed this out on a video last week or so. It's a 4-year, $64 million contract extension. That comes out to an average of $16 million a season. That doesn't put him in top 5 money. It kind of flirts towards the number 10 spot in terms of the highest paid cornerbacks in the league. Now, we do need to have a bit of a tough conversation because these are big dollars, right? $45 million is not something to sleep on. People are going to see 64 and think that's the contract. Here's a little free life hack for you, okay? Take the years and take the guaranteed of any contract. Subtract 1 from the years. 3 now. It's a 3-year, $45 million contract. That's basically how every NFL contract works. If they sign a 5-year deal, it's a 4-year deal and it's all the guaranteed money. Because by the final year of that contract, 90% of that guaranteed money is paid out, so you can always get out of that contract pretty much scot-free by the end. So it's a 3-year, $45 million extension. Now, AJ Terrell really emerged on the scene. First-round pick out of Clemson. 4 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles. He had 9 touchdowns allowed in his first 2 seasons, 6 of which came as a rookie, but he really buckled up his sophomore season, only giving up 3 touchdowns. However, the last 2 years, they just simply have not been as good as the first 2 years, right? I mean, it's not even so much about the lack of interceptions. I think interceptions are awesome. They're great. They're takeaways. We love that. But if you're a Revis Island type of corner and quarterbacks just don't throw your way because the guy's not open, that's almost as good as a pick in a lot of situations. So I'm a little bit on the fence about whether or not AJ Terrell is truly worth all that money, but I don't think 3 years, $45 million would be some massive type of overpay. I still think AJ Terrell can be a team's CB1, but most importantly, the Falcons, they are down Jeff Okudah. Like, he's a free agent, so you only have 1 true starting outside corner. You don't have a whole lot growing in the farm system. You drafted Clark Phillips last year, but it doesn't seem like it's a great time for Atlanta to try and reinvent their cornerback room. Now, their new DC, Jimmy Lake, his specialty is DBs. So when you've got a pretty good DB, and I think AJ Terrell is a pretty good defensive back, putting him with Jimmy Lake and locking him up for the next 3 seasons. He's under contract for 1 more year. So 4 more years of AJ Terrell. I think that's a good recipe for success in the Falcons secondary. I do have some honorable mentions, by the way, for a perfect offseason for the Falcons. The Jags re-signed Calvin Ridley. Why? Well, because when Atlanta traded Calvin Ridley to Jacksonville, there were some contingencies based on whether or not Calvin Ridley had his 5th-year option picked up, stuff like that. But the final one was whether or not the Jags re-sign Calvin Ridley. And if they do, the Falcons get a 2nd-round draft pick from Jacksonville. It's in our best interest that Jacksonville re-signs Calvin Ridley. Otherwise, it's a 3rd-rounder to Atlanta. Cut Taylor Heineke and Jonnu Smith, and you're going to get $13 million. That would be a bad deal in free agency money. You cut those 2 guys, you just pay for Jonathan Greenard. Would you rather have your backup quarterback and backup tight end or a 12.5 sack player? I think I know my answer. And then I'll toss out drafting wide receiver Troy Franklin. Drake London, Tee Higgins are great outside receivers. But you still want to have someone who can help over the middle of the field, someone with burning speed. I think Troy Franklin out of Eugene, Oregon's got that track speed. Now that's going to do it for us on today's show. I really appreciate those of you that take time out of your day to come hang out with us here at Falcons Today. We will sign off and catch up later.